In my first behind-the-scenes video, I recommended that new anti-racism content creators speak thoughtfully. So I thought it would be interesting for you to see some times when I struggled to speak thoughtfully. One of the things that makes it so difficult to find the right words is that there's so many different ways that I can say the wrong thing. For example, sometimes it's nothing too serious, just an incorrect implication. Like this moment in the early days when I was filming the conclusion of a July 4th video. I'm calling white people to civic responsibility. And this connects all the way back to the first episode. It wasn't that long ago, Robert. All the way back, it wasn't that long ago. This is episode 3. Jesus. Other times, I just sort of malfunction and find myself saying something that is simply incorrect. That insecurity was a result of me working from stereotypes that led me to conclude that I would most certainly have more in common with a black guy. No, that's not true. Sometimes the distinction is more subtle. I'll film a segment, rewatch it, and decide that I want to say something differently. It might have been fine if I made no changes. It would just be better if I said a different word at a key moment. Here, I'm talking about something that happened in the UK. Listen how, in this first take, I characterize people engaging in destruction. Far-right activists released a list of 100 sites they plan to target. Activists? Well, I didn't think that was strong enough. I didn't think it was accurate. So, I said this instead. Far-right terrorists released a list of 100 sites they plan to target. Activists versus terrorists. I thought there was a pretty big difference in those words, and it was important for me to make that change. Then there are times, usually when I'm filming without a script, when I know what I want to say in my head, but it comes out wrong. I suspect you might be willing to concede that the early days in the history of this young country would be written by the people in power, which were white people, and that we white people might benefit by reading a little extra, better rounded out history of our own country. Ooh, our own country. Ooh. Oh my gosh, the way I first said it sounded problematic while I was saying it. It's like my brain was startled by what my mouth was saying. So instead of our own country, I just said this. I suspect you might be willing to concede that the history of the early days of this young country was written by the people in power, white people, and that perhaps we would do well for ourselves by exposing ourselves to a little extra history and rounding out our understanding of the history of the United States of America. And that's the ending I went with. That's what was published, which is fine. I clearly avoided the problem I heard in the first version, though looking back, I do think something of what I originally meant was lost. It's like I wanted to call white people to ownership, to feel a little ownership in a small O, not a big O. I don't know. It's fine the way it is. Now, just for some perspective, consider that what I'm showing you here is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of me finding the right words. For the vast majority of struggles, I don't have video clips to show because they occurred during the writing process. That is where I would bump up against my own tendencies, my own errors of thinking. Oh my gosh, one of the things that I went through multiple times early on was, I would say something like, people do this and should be doing this. And I'd reread this script with my pen and I would probably the first pass, cross out people and write white people. If I meant white people, I should be saying white people. And then, sometimes, when I went over it again, I would cross out white people and write we. We do this, or should do that. Sort of from distancing language to more accurate language to more honest language. Hearing that, you can probably imagine that writing for Rho Talks Race, trying to speak to you, has been quite the journey for me. Like keeping an anti-racism journal or going through an anti-racism workbook. It's been pretty interesting. All right, I'll share one last scenario, then we will call it a day. This last one is kind of lighthearted, real, but not too serious. Every once in a great while, I will occasionally struggle not to find the right words, but the right feeling. And one way that can happen is when I see something I want to respond to earlier in the day, and it stirs up some emotion in me, like, oh my God, I've got to respond to that. But I don't have time to right away. So I come back to it later in the day, and the message is still important to me. I still think the same way about the topic. But the problem is I'm not nearly as worked up as I was initially. So what you're about to see is one such occasion. You were so close. And then came the beard. That wasn't hard enough. I slapped the table for emphasis, but decided that I hadn't hit it hard enough, I guess, or the right way. So I tried again. You were so close. And then came the bearded fellow. Oh my gosh, and the falling phone, I became famous for that. Well, not famous for that. Nobody knew it but me. But it was not infrequent, and it was never just falling over. It was like this long, drawn-out tumble to the ground. Anyway, I hope you all appreciated seeing a little bit more behind the scenes of Rho Talks Race. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. At this point, it's been